Originally, I posted a video on my YouTube channel sharing my thoughts and feelings about the ending of She-Ra, in particular with Catra's redemption arc. It was only up for about 3 hours and had only about a little over 100 views, and although the video did have a lot of support, some of my comments ended up being misinterpreted, which led the conversation in different directions. And the viewers also raised other questions and issues that I hadn't considered addressing in my 13-minute video, simply because I didn't think that they were relevant to my core message, also because it was supposed to be a 13-minute video. So what I decided to do, like any normal, well-adjusted person, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to take this video down, I'm going to make it better, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go further in depth with the analysis, so buckle up everybody, we're down for a big ride here. So this video is going to reuse some of the language from that first video, but it's also going to respond to some points being made in the comments, and my responses, which would have gotten lost in the inevitable YouTube comment stream. So, starting over from the beginning. So recently, Netflix's She-Ra remake, led by Noelle Stevenson, came to a close after 2 years and 5 seasons. The series ended not only with the world being saved, but also with the passionate kiss between Catra and Adora, signifying that the relationship is canon. So during the course of the final season, Catra undergoes a redemption arc, and at the beginning of the series, she is the jaded, emotionally turbulent villain, and by the time that the series draws to a close, she becomes a beloved member of the hero squad. While I enjoyed the ending of the show, and that such a conflicted character finally found peace, I couldn't help but personally feel, wasn't this too fast and easy? So, before I even get started here, I'm going to reiterate another point. Now, in my personal opinion, Season 5 is the best written season of She-Ra. They did a really great job when it came to wrapping up character arcs and the overall plot. I, like many fans, have followed She-Ra from its development to its release, have watched every single season and episode. It is incredibly diverse representation, which is so important for young kids who are looking for role models. So I didn't want to make this video just to vilify it or imply that the show didn't have a place in the world. And I'm not making this video to undermine the work of the creators, as the series is incredibly important for so many different reasons. I love the show, and that's why I wanted to so passionately talk about it now. So even though I love the ending of the show, I mean, come on, I'm a huge Catradora fan from day one. But even though I love that ending, it is in some ways unsatisfying. In my personal opinion, I believe that Catra's redemption arc was far too rushed and should have been started at an earlier point in the series. I don't really understand why Catra's redemption arc took so long to begin, and why she doesn't join the Princess Squad at an earlier point. So at the beginning of the series, Catra has 3 reasons preventing her from joining the squad. The first is that she has abandonment issues. The pilot presents that Adora joining the princesses was an extreme betrayal for Catra. Catra develops abandonment issues and resentment towards Adora. But if you really think about it, Adora had never abandoned Catra. Adora tries at least 3 times to get Catra to join forces with her. Season 1, Episode 2, Season 1, Episode 11, and Season 3, Episode 5. Shadow Weaver, the girls' guardian, adopted mother, whatever language you want to use there, also offers Catra to join her once in Season 3, Episode 4. Granted, she does attack Catra immediately thereafter, but this is because she's trying to rescue Adora from the Horde and also protect Glimmer from being attacked, and Catra's not exactly standing down at this moment in time. So, Catra's abandonment issues lose a lot of purpose for me, given that her friends extended an olive branch to her repeatedly. So in my original video, I asked a lot of rhetorical questions that led some viewers to interpret that I didn't understand why Catra kept rejecting them. Catra has a lot of internalized hatred. She doesn't trust that others love her and care about her, but she knows that people love her because she rejects that love, and we've seen that with how Scorpion and Dora have tried to help her. So I didn't miss these things at all, nor am I confused by them. I'm more so confused by how she stays in the I have been abandoned mindset for so long, even when she knows she's in the wrong and that these things aren't true. It's one thing to have low self-esteem and believe that everyone hates you, but it's another thing to gaslight others, which is exactly what she's doing, and this is what I stated in my original video. It is unfair and hurtful for her to make statements that people don't care about her when they do, and have tried so hard to get her to recognize that. In Season 1, Episode 11, she tells Adora that she didn't want her to come back, and then a few minutes later says that she was longing for her return, but now realizes how her leaving was the best thing that ever happened to her. This is textbook gaslighting, constantly changing or denying reality to fit your narrative and feelings. This is why the abandonment issues lose strength for me. To a certain extent, she recognizes that her friends care about her, and she just constantly keeps rejecting them and trying to superimpose her own reality. which is harmful for the other characters. So additionally, Catra harbors resentment towards Adora because Shadow Weaver favored Adora over her. This is also one of the things that prevented her from joining the best friend squad. Catra has an inferiority complex and can't really stand to see Adora rise to such power and prominence in both the princess squad and the horde, when Catra herself has struggled to be seen. She placed second to Adora constantly, and this frustrated her. She didn't want her entire life to revolve around chasing after Adora as second best. Now, that reason isn't bad either, but it's not the strongest. See, I would understand Catra's resentment more if Adora had perhaps joined in on some of Shadow Weaver's abuse, or consistently turned a blind eye to it, like she just stood back and let Catra get verbally attacked by their adoptive mother. But in nearly all of the flashback scenes, in nearly all of them, again, nearly all of them, Adora repeatedly is shown standing up for her and taking care of her, even when Catra herself is in the wrong. At one point, she physically intervenes between Catra and Shadow Weaver as a means of protecting her and begs for her to be spared from punishment. Some people defended a statement Catra makes in Season 1, Episode 11, in which she claims that Adora never stood up for her in a way that would get her on Shadow Weaver's bad side. Catra stands take this statement as a means of justifying her inability to trust Adora, that Adora didn't do everything she could to protect her as a child. But Catra stans should also recognize how ridiculous that sounds, given that Adora herself is an abused child. All too often, I think we forget that from the day that she was taken by the Horde, Adora has not only been groomed, but forced to defend her friend from their adoptive mother, or otherwise witness and experience the aftermath of traumatic abuse. Having to do this on an everyday basis is emotionally and physically exhausting. Adora also has flashbacks and nightmares of her time with Shadow Weaver. I don't deny that Catra bore the brunt of Shadow Weaver's physical abuse, but that doesn't mean that Adora is deserving of Catra's anger and frustration. Adora is not responsible for Shadow Weaver's actions. Ultimately, it is completely unfair of Catra and her defenders to expect that Adora, a child, put herself in harm's way in order to protect her every single time, or to protect her in whatever highly specific way that Catra wanted. People also took issue with how I framed Catra's inferiority complex as fueling resentment towards Adora. They were particularly upset with the resentment word choice and argued that it was actually guilt. But these characters are so complex, I would argue that both feelings are correct. The guilt comes from Catra's love for Adora and her longing to be with her, her recognition that she is committing wrong. The resentment comes from her inferiority complex and how she doesn't want to follow around Adora her whole life. She wants to be her own person and make her own decisions. If you think that the guilt is a more significant emotion, that's fine, but you can't tell me that Adora isn't hurt by Catra's actions. There is no way that Adora interprets these feelings exclusively as guilt. The third and final reason that prevents Catra from joining the Princess Squad is mommy issues. While I recognize it is a bit crass, I use that term as a means of summarizing Catra's problems and complex relationship with her abusive mother. Catra stays with the Horde because she wants the approval of Shadow Weaver. This ties into her inferiority complex. As an abused child, she's trapped in a cycle of hating her mother but desperately wanting her love and attention. Again, to not be second best to Adora. Essentially, these are the three primary reasons, abandonment issues, inferiority complex, and mommy issues, that make Catra not want to join forces with Adora. Now, for the first 2 seasons, these reasons carry us along strongly, albeit imperfectly. It's obvious from the repeated flashbacks and pointed moments of yearning that Catra wants nothing more than to be with her. Gradually, as the first 2 seasons go by, we see these reasons becoming weaker and weaker. The buildup is so strong that it seems like Catra is going to leave the Horde very soon. In the Season 3 episode Once Upon a Time in the Crimson Waste, the character's quest for peace leads them to the Crimson Waste. Prior to this, we've seen Hordak treating Catra like garbage. He undermines her, threatens her, and publicly humiliates her. He decides to cast her out in the Crimson Waste for a quest, but he makes it clear that he expects her to die, given that the area is so treacherous. But Catra rises to power in the Wastes, and actually begins to enjoy herself a little bit. This episode is critical because it presents an alternative to Catra's current life, one where she doesn't have to answer to a malevolent overlord and can do as she pleases. Here she gets her first taste of true freedom, and it makes her happy. This prompts Scorpia to approach her and encourage her to leave the Horde. But Catra deflects and retreats from this conversation, much to my aggravation. People argue that this was a huge decision to make, that she'd be leaving behind everything that she ever knew. While that is true, also consider that prior to this conversation, Catra proved to herself that she doesn't need the Horde and can stand on her own 2 feet in the Crimson Waste. Not only that, but she can thrive here. At this point, she is not so critical to the cause that Hordak would go chasing after her if she disappeared. After all, he fully expected her to die during her mission. Again, the Crimson Waste is a nightmarish land from which no one returns. So when taking that into account along with her political downfall in the Horde, it seems like a very obvious decision to make, even if, understandably, she needs to take the time to think about it. But what motivates Catra to eventually leave the Crimson Waste and return to the Horde is the fact that Shadow Weaver is still alive and has joined forces with Adora. This hits Catra hard. Once again, her abusive mother has caused her problems and has chosen Adora over her. Time to blow up the world, I guess? If you're a bit alarmed by that jump in logic, you should be. Catra goes back to the Horde only to open up a portal which results in Glimmer's mother, Queen Angela, getting killed, and causing a lot of chaos in general. Catra rants that she doesn't care that she's causing the end of the world. She simply just doesn't want to let Adora win. Some were irritated that I explicitly stated that her mommy issues led her to blow up the world, but I wasn't incorrect in stating that Shadow Weaver's betrayal motivated Catra to do those things. Yes, it's a culmination of issues, but this was her breaking point. I received a long-winded response which ended somewhere along the lines of, given everything that's happened, it's understandable that she loses at the end of Season 3. When I read that, my heart dropped. This seems to be the problem within the analysis of Catra's personality. As her fans, we're too quick to let her get away with egregiously awful actions simply because she was abused. We, myself included, may love her and see her within ourselves, but we all must understand the fact that Catra was abused does not justify her actions towards others. It only explains them, which is an entirely different matter, and that explanation is in itself flawed when it comes to the choices that Catra makes in Season 3. Your mother betraying you should not lead you to destroy the world. That is an extreme jump in logic. Catra doesn't have a right to blow up the world because she was abused. She doesn't have a right to kill someone's mother because she was abused by her own mother. Forgive me for the redundancy here, but I just really wanted to drive it home for anyone still on the fence about it. Even if I did agree that Catra's decision made sense, that she is so angry and filled with self-hatred that she chooses to destroy everyone including herself, she still committed this horrible act, and it should have taken her far longer than it did to make up for it. Now, everyone has a right to process abuse in different ways, and this is brilliantly explored in the show. Adora processes it by engaging in martyrdom and burying her problems and ignoring them for the sake of the greater good. She insists on trying to fix people, as she fixed so many situations as a child. She also overrides her friends' decisions to risk their own lives. Catra, on the other hand, engages in self-destructive behaviors and lashing out against other people. Both of these methods are unhealthy, but only one results in others being physically hurt, or in the Queen's case, killed. People argue that Catra has simply not learned healthy coping mechanisms, but I feel like that's untrue. If she didn't learn them from Adora, she would have learned them from Scorpia, or Kyle, Lonnie, and Rogelio. Catra knows better coping mechanisms, she simply chooses not to use them. Even if Catra didn't know any coping mechanisms, she should at the very least recognize that nuking the world is an extremely bad decision. She expresses little to no hesitation in her course of actions, no concern for the feelings of others around her. The end of Season 3 places Catra in a dilemma that is nearly impossible to come back from. Rather than allowing her to perhaps distance herself from the conflict and spend some time in the Crimson Waste, the writers have Catra make an irrevocable decision. She continues to spend the next 2 seasons as Adora's enemy, stirs up problems within the Horde, and when captured by Prime, attempts to get on his good side. Given the outcome of the series, these actions make the redemption arc rushed. How does one bounce back from murder, the near destruction of the universe, and constant betrayals toward your friends? By the time that the series ends, Catra hasn't fully come to terms with her issues, nor has she explicitly apologized to Adora. Telling someone I love you is powerful, it's beautiful, it's healing. But I love you doesn't mean I'm sorry for perpetuating months to years of abuse, backstabbing, and causing you untold amounts of emotional pain. And that's just an apology for Adora specifically. Although Catra expresses remorse for her many bad decisions, she rarely apologizes to another character, which doesn't make her someone who has completely acknowledged the error of her ways. People argue that she did apologize to others, which again, my argument was that she never apologized, but that she rarely did it. The few explicitly stated apologies were so abrupt and swiftly resolved, it was like she had never tried to kill any of them. Aside from Perfuma, who had a righteous but brief outburst towards her in Season 5, Episode 10, the characters harbored little to no resentment towards her. Even Perfuma seems to forgive her by the end of the episode. This is bizarre, to say the least, and also problematic. You do not deserve an apology or forgiveness simply because you decided to do good things. You have to be worthy of forgiveness. You have to earn it. In the position of all the other characters, you shouldn't be a doormat who just forgives all the wrongdoings against you, even if the person who committed those wrongs has gone through their own struggles. Some people say that her arc was largely internalized, but a children's television show shouldn't present the process of forgiveness as easily as they did, given the gravity of Catra's numerous, bad, externalized actions. Yes, Catra had moments when she was willing to sacrifice herself for the greater good. She had moments when she was willing to live with the consequences of her actions. But in a series filled with people being forced to make difficult decisions and live with the consequences, hers came too late. I'm not going to start applauding Catra for finally taking steps to undo her actions when she should have done it a long time ago. While it takes a great deal of strength to willingly sacrifice yourself for the cause, I'm not going to commend her for that when she created a lot of those problems. By the time that the series ends, I am unconvinced that Catra is ready to assume the role of loving girlfriend. As a huge Catradora fan, I want to believe it, but I can't, and that's what frustrates me the most. Even when Catra is holding Adora in her arms and begging her to regain consciousness, there is a certain edge to her commentary that makes me uncomfortable. She asks Adora to stay, and I personally interpreted this comment as Catra telling Adora not to run from her problems. I also believe Catra is telling Adora not to run from her desires. This is something I erroneously did not explicitly state in my video, but I am now pointing it out because that comment still bothers me, given that Catra herself has spent the entire series running away from her desires. In a previous episode, Catra expresses frustration with Adora's martyrdom, but does not take the steps to appropriately address that. She does what she did before. She gets angry at Adora, yells at her, runs away from her, hurts her. I'm not saying that Adora's martyrdom isn't annoying or even harmful for Catra, but if we ever stop to consider why Adora developed a martyr complex in the first place, it's because of Catra. Adora's martyrdom didn't start when she found Mara's sword. It began in her infancy when she was stolen by the Horde. She grew up defending Catra. She felt like she had to, not because she loved Catra, but because she believed that no one else would and that Catra had to be protected. Adora stays on Shadow Weaver's good side because she has to protect Catra. If she loses her standing with Shadow Weaver, she knows that she can no longer protect her. Catra didn't ask for Adora to be a martyr, but Adora doesn't anyways. Now, Adora does make a decision that's rather selfish, and that's to join the princesses regardless of whether or not Catra goes with her. She wants to join the princesses because she wants to protect people, and yes, that ties into her martyrdom, but it is still an instance of her following her own desires. And yet, Catra punishes her for it. Catra refuses to go with her and continues to lob her abandonment issues and anger at Adora when they fight. All I personally wanted in that moment was for Catra to encourage Adora, to tell her, in a less aggressive and hurtful way, that she has a choice, to ensure her that they are going to find a way to work through this together. But Catra pitches a fit and runs away, leaving Adora to cry alone in the woods. It breaks my heart every time I watch it, that Adora has given so much of herself to a person who continually rejects her. Regardless of what issues Catra is dealing with, that is cruel, and Adora is undeserving of that. Even if she returns to her side in the end, that whole argument still stings. To be clear, I'm not saying that Catra shouldn't have ended up with Adora simply because she has unresolved issues, as that would be unfair. I absolutely agree with Stevenson, and that was a logical conclusion to the end of the series. It was a summation of their character arcs. Further, I don't believe in the "you have to love yourself before you can learn to love others" mantra. Personally, I think that that idea is toxic and can actually prevent the healing process. Trauma will carry with you your whole life, and love can help you work through your trauma, and Catra certainly deserves that love. But so does Adora. Adora deserves a partner that can own up to her actions, that can apologize for her mistakes and lovingly guide her through difficult situations. Their ending up together would have been stronger and more satisfying had Catra's redemption arc started at an earlier point. I can't shake that there is toxicity that clearly exists between the two of them, and I don't think either of them have learned the tools to address and work through that. Had Catra left the Horde earlier, she could have gotten a smoother, more detailed redemption arc. I'm not saying that Catra should have joined the Princess Squad at the end of Season 3 or the beginning of Season 4. That would have also been a huge leap to make, and I understand why the writers avoided that. But if she stayed in the Crimson Waste, we could have seen her start to work through some of her issues, maybe even build friendships with some of the other characters. We could have explored other adventures and stories that I think would have been even more compelling. As a character, Catra wouldn't have lost complexity at all. In fact, she would have been better for it. Now look, you could be sitting there saying to yourself, hey, the writers aren't saying that Catra is problem-free by the end of the series. There's a lot of rebuilding to do, and even other worlds that they have to save. That's certainly true, and I wouldn't expect for every issue to be resolved by the end of the series. Stevenson herself admits that she doesn't know if Adora ever truly learns that it's okay to show weakness and ask for help. This is okay. Perhaps the show wanted to imply that there are unresolved issues with the characters, but that message isn't as strongly communicated with Catra. Like I said, none of these characters seem to harbor any resentment towards her. It's all quickly resolved. This is why I ultimately believe we needed more progress on her character beginning from an earlier point. One of the biggest messages of the She-Ra series is to not let your past define you. This is a noble message, one that's worthy of being told, and so important for young children to understand. But when it comes to Catra, I believe that the execution of this message is flawed. Catra is all too easily forgiven in the final season. While I adored the ending of the show, I couldn't help but think that everyone that Catra hurt deserves better. Does this mean that I hate She-Ra as a whole? Absolutely not. It's an important show, it's a powerful show, it's a show that we needed. Does this mean that I hate Catra? No. She's still one of my favorite characters and one of the most entertaining reasons to watch the show. Does this mean that I don't appreciate the work of the talented staff who worked on this show? Again, no. They're awesome, and I'm going to continue to support their projects, and I encourage others to do the same. Does this mean that I love Adora way more in retrospect? Absolutely. And you know, if you're sitting there and you share the same thoughts that I've had about the show, and you're like, but how can we fix this? She-Ra movie. I recognize that this is incredibly strange to say, but doing a movie or a sequel series and adding additional content would really help remedy this situation. We would be given an opportunity to see how the characters possibly harbor resentment towards Catra still, or if she makes some more ill-thought-out actions, how they question her motivations. This would also give Catra a chance to work through her actions, continue making amends, and solidify the fact that she is truly a changed person. If we added a sequel, such as a movie or another series, we would be able to see how forgiveness is really more so a process, not just a single action that occurs and then, oh, there's no further resentment, there's no further issues here. We could also further explore Adora and Catra's relationship and see how Catra works to be a more supportive and loving partner. And I, as a Catradora fan, again, would be all for that. So a sequel that incorporates these situations would actually eliminate any concerns that I have in regards to this character being a better person in the long run. So, She-Ra movie. Thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to this video, to watch this video, to listen to my ranting. I hope that you enjoyed. If you did enjoy this video, please leave a like. It really does help the channel out. You can also subscribe to the channel. I don't do a lot of these types of videos, these kind of video commentary things. I mostly just cover LGBT games, so if you're down to check out some really awesome indie developers that make queer content, I mean, go ahead and subscribe, because that's literally the majority of this channel. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching. Bye! Special shout out to Patreons AceWolf741, Deep Dive Dylan, Brian White, Caleb Putnam, and Robin Harper.